Hi Amit, welcome
Hi, Tushar.
to my podcast, Right by Tushar Kansal.
Thank you, Tushar. Honor to be here.
So, for everyone who are watching this today, Amit is the founder of Grover Impact Ventures. He's a serial entrepreneur and a conscious capitalist, actively building early stage venture capital funds with a strong ESG and impact focus. Amit comes with over 24 years of corporate and entrepreneurial experience in international business, brand marketing, and management consulting. He has held leading roles in MNCs such as ITC Limited, Barista Coffee Company, BCG, and Pernod Ricard. Distinguished with a full-time MBA from Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand, Amit took a plunge into entrepreneurship in 2009, founding Grover and Company. From humble beginnings in New Zealand to Grover and Company's expansion into Australia, UAE, and the UK, Amit has come a long way in understanding the impact of cross-border business on SMEs. Today, Amit plays an active role as an impact ambassador, advocating environmental and social causes such as climate change and gender equality through women-focused incubators and food technology and financial technology-focused early-stage venture capital funds in Asia Pacific and the Middle East. Welcome again, Amit, to our podcast.
Thank you, Tushar.
So, Amit, you've had a very long journey. You have seen it all. You have worked in MNCs. You have done your own since a very young age, and then again, after being offered a very plum role, you again, went into entrepreneurship across countries. So, tell us a bit about how it started. I mean, where were you born, and how did it all start?
Look, Tushar, entrepreneurship is something I'm actually a firm believer that either you're born with it. It's very difficult to read books and listen to people and really become an entrepreneur. So the seeds of entrepreneurship, and shades of it, you can see it, right from the time you're a child. It's just that, we obviously can't recognize those traits, and it takes us years once we start recognizing that this is what we are meant to do. So I think the seeds of answering your question, I was born in New Delhi. I am from New Delhi, India, and born and raised also in New Delhi. So the seeds of entrepreneurship I started seeing very early on in my school days. I remember my very first venture was setting up a small bookstore in my house where I would lend my friends Archie's comic books and Hardy Boys for 50 paisa, 1 rupee for an overnight rental.
Wow.
And for most people, that was probably a role playing that he's a kid and he's trying to kind of have fun. But even, but those are the really early days where if somebody was to see it with today's experience, would probably say that, yes, an entrepreneur is born. I think my second venture for which I got really into trouble was in school, where I was trading these, those trump cards, WWF trump cards that you would play with your friends, and lending money to my friends on interest. So I would lend 5 rupees and tell people that, okay, I want 5 rupees 50 paisa back when you give it to me. So without realizing what I'm really doing in my fourth or fifth or sixth grade, I was kind of going towards a mindset of, look, I got to make money on my own money. So this is where it all started, yeah, Tushar. And then obviously I come from a very middle class, service oriented family. Nobody is really an entrepreneur in my family. So this is a journey I've had to learn myself and discover, myself. There was nobody to really hold my hand and teach me how it's done. So yes, I started doing a lot of this kind of stuff through school and college, and understanding where I wanted to make a buck. I also tried my hands, of course, failed miserably in building a .com. So fashion.com, indiafashion.com was a website I opened, I think, in 1997, when the .com boom was quite big and everybody wanted to get into it. We all thought that we are going to become, Sabir Bhatia of Hotmail, and we are all going to become youngest millionaires of the world. But anyway, I jumped into that with an idea that I wanted to consolidate and aggregate the fashion industry from models to choreographers to venues on hire to sound equipment on hire, and everything that you need, and all stakeholders that you need, from makeup artists to everybody. I guess India was not ready back then, and it was not even that digital that it is today. So anyway, I burnt a little bit of my savings that I made in companies and through my summer jobs in college, and learned it the hard way. That is, a concept and an idea is just not enough. Execution is everything, and market readiness is also something. But anyway, so like I was saying, entrepreneurship kind of was in my genetics and DNA, and I tried my hands on it many times over, through small endeavors and small experiments. Then my corporate journey began. Yeah, being from a middle class family, I graduated from Delhi University, and then it was all about get a good job. So I got a campus placement in an Indian company called ITC, which stands for Indian Tobacco Company. And you, I could say by default, my fate was sealed to understand how ventures start, even with the biggest corporates in the country. So when I went through a management training program, many of my colleagues who went through that entire program got into tobacco, hotels, and many other businesses ITC runs, very structured businesses and large scale businesses. Whereas I was put into a division called New Business Group that was all about new businesses that ITC wanted to launch and diversify from their old businesses. So I was put into a project that was in the inception phase called Will's Lifestyle, which was ITC's entry into fashion and retail. And being a trainee and a young guy, I was put in charge of working with all the team, putting presentation material together, coordinating with the market research agency. McKinsey and Company and KSA Technopack were hired as consultants to help ITC build this plan together and present to the board. It was back in the day, I'm talking about 1998. This was a very large project from an India standpoint. ITC was willing to invest in excess of $100 million, which was huge back then. So when I started coordinating and dealing with these companies along with my senior bosses, I started learning, how business plans are made, how market research is carried out, how critical information is broken down into ways that you would go and raise capital internally from your board, because they would ask you those pivotal questions, right? And become the devil's advocate. So I was a part of that whole process, putting the material together. And I think I was very, very fortunate in comparison with most of my peers, because that's where I started learning how a new business is conceived, how you put it into action, how you go up to the board and raise capital, and then how does the rollout really happen, all stage by stage and step by step. So that's what I did for a few years, and it was unimaginable amount of learning. And then I became even more lucky. I was coming back from a flight from Bangalore, a city in the south of India, and I met this very charismatic gentleman called Ravi Singh Deol. And I think my fate took me to another direction. Ravi Singh Deol's background was very prolific. He was an FMS MBA. He had spent about 20 years in FMCG. He was at that time resigned as the director marketing for Coca-Cola India. And he was starting this, quite an exciting concept called Barista Coffee Company, which was supposed to be the first coffee shop of India. India didn't really had organized retail. Organized retail was very small. And, we didn't have that international concepts like Starbucks today, back in the day. So Ravi and I started speaking, and he said that, hey, why don't you join me in this journey? I want great guys like you to be able to build this business. So I took a risk. I'm like, I'm still young. If things don't work out, I can always go back into mainstream business. So I quit my job in ITC, much against my family's wishes, that had very strong opinions about what I was about to do. But I think somewhere I was an entrepreneur. I thought like an entrepreneur in life. So I took that risk and I joined Ravi.
Would you say that even while working with corporates, there was always an entrepreneurial trait in you, that you took responsibility, things gravitated towards you, and that's what
100%.
made you even
I
a better
think
entrepreneur?
spot on. I think as a personality, I was always the guy who would opt to do things the very first. I would never shy away from things. In fact, I would want more responsibility. And it was not because I wanted to, partly Yes, I wanted to keep my bosses and my superiors happy that this is a guy who takes a lot of initiative. But I think beyond that, as a very young guy, Tushar, I recognized one thing, that I'm getting paid to learn. Now, it can't be a better situation. Most places, if you go to a university or a college to learn a skill, you have to pay them. Here, somebody's paying you a stipend or a salary and teaching you things that nobody in the world will teach you. So I thought of that as a great relationship building exercise and a great learning exercise for which I was getting paid. So I looked at it very differently than what most people look at their jobs or their time in a corporate. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
That comes
It was
from
always
gratitude, right? I mean, when people have gratitude, they always welcome and they thank that, I'm getting this chance to do something.
To be honest, I don't think it was gratitude back in the day. I was really, really young, Tushar. I was 2021. I don't think that I even knew the meaning of the word gratitude back in then. I was just going with the flow. But
Right.
somewhere I felt that, this is a great opportunity. This is a win-win. You're getting paid to build connections and to learn.
Right.
And you can't be in a better situation than that. So, I took it like that. And like I said, then I joined Barista Coffee Company, and it was one of the most wonderful journeys of my life. Building,
Which year was
when
that?
this was in the year 2000.
2000. Okay.
Yeah, 1999. So I think it
So
was the
you
December
are,
of
in a way, you
1999.
are the pioneers of one of the pioneers of the Indian coffee industry.
For sure, because when I joined Barista Coffee Company, there was one pilot store in Vasant Vihar in a place called Basant Lok. And, when I left
We are
Barista,
market.
there were 300 stores. Yeah, absolutely. So, the journey from one single store to 300 stores, I sat through that whole journey. I saw people come in from the industry, our team going from 6 people to 600 people, Tata investment coming in, it became a Tata Coffee Company. We roped in Lavazza Coffee Company from Italy to do the joint venture with us. We were buying coffee from Lavazza and partly from Tata Coffee. There was a lot of excitement. We won brand of the year many years, year on year. So I went through that whole transition of not only how a brand is built, which was on everybody's mouth, but also how operations are put in place, how resources are managed, how again capital is raised to bootstrap an exercise like that, how supply chain works, because it was a complete 100% company owned model. It was not a franchise model. So we had 130 stores.
You mean you own the stores also?
Absolute. I mean, own the stores as in you will lease the real estate, but they were all company owned formats. There was no concept of franchise back then. So I think, given the fact that you've got 280 stores on your balance sheet and you're paying rent to 280 landlords, and you've got over 700 operational staff running that for you, and multiple vendors that you're managing from Taj Sats, where the food came in,
And
from
also
Tata
first
Coffee
time
and
in the
Lavazza.
market. Yeah.
And first time in the Indian market, where you didn't have the right level of warehousing, you didn't have the right logistics partners, because everything was very new for India. There was nothing, which was, properly placed back then. So the whole journey of how do you build a brand, how do you build operations, how do you kind of build supply chain, how do you do the right staffing, how do you kind of expand, get capital, justify burn rate. So I started learning all of that back then with Ravi. And when you started off, there were hardly any people. We were 5 or 6 people. So I think we were wearing multiple hats. So I worked in Delhi for a while. Then Ravi sent me to Bombay. I opened about 30 stores in Bombay. So it was an amazing experience, not only from a point of view of business, but also the target age of employees in Barista Coffee Company were pretty much between 23 and 34. So we had a very, very young team of people and very passionate people joining us. So honestly, it felt like a party every day of the week. I mean, when you've got so many young people working together, and majority of those people came from a hospitality background for obvious reasons, it was just a party. Like, we thought that, we've never seen an environment where we could walk into an office in a polo shirt and a khaki chinos. And we were one of the first companies in India. Yeah, absolutely.
Formal, everybody used to
Absolutely.
dress up with ties and...
There you go. So, I mean, not only what we were doing was very revolutionary for the country, but our culture and the way we were doing things and what we were doing was absolutely an eye-opener for everybody, that these are a set of boys that are having so much of fun and building this brand that everybody wanted to join Barista Coffee Company. It became a brand like that. So, I mean, I had the time of my life, honestly, and I really looked up to Ravi Singh Deol. I think if I could call anybody in my entire journey somebody that I wanted to be like as a very, very young and impressionable guy, probably it would be Ravi Singh Deol. I can't think of anybody in the world but that man. He was the most well-groomed, the most polished, highly educated, highly competent, highly driven man that I have met in my life. And trust me, I've traveled the world, I've done business, I've done millions of dollars of business. But yet, when I close my eyes, and if somebody was to tell me that, Amit, who do you admire in your journey? Automatically, the face that comes to my mind is Ravi Singh Deol. So he taught me a lot of those
what
things.
did you achieve? Like you started in Barista in 2000,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, in 1999, December of 1999.
December.
Yeah.
And within, I think, in a very short span of time,
In a very short. So we opened about 300 stores in 2 years, in
300.
less than
Oh,
24
wow.
months. Yeah, yeah. So we opened stores in obviously India and then Sri Lanka and Dubai. And then, because I've had experiences with two new brands. One is Will's Lifestyle and the other is Barista, both a part of big corporates. I wanted to then go and kind of get some mature brand experience to complete my marketing and brand marketing journey. That, how a mature brand is managed and what are the complexities in that. So I got handpicked by this company called Seagram, which is today called Pernod Ricard, because a French company called Pernod Ricard bought them. So Seagram India hired me as the marketing, I was the marketing manager for IMFL, which is Indian made foreign liquor, along with managing international brands. So this was a completely different ball game, a completely different experience, where everything was set. You were walking into something which was already 18,000 crores. You had mature brands like Blender's Pride and 100 Pipers, which was a well-oiled machinery. You had international brands that were very well-known like Chivas Regal. And I was put in charge of managing these international brands and building them in India. And as you are aware, tobacco and alcohol can't advertise. So we were doing a lot of surrogate advertising. We were doing heaps of events, heaps of activities to build the brand in whatever way we could.
Which year was this?
This was in 2003, early 2003. Yeah. So that's what I did. Yeah, I mean, I joined Seagram. I worked there for about 2.5 years. Learned the whole business. Many times went to Scotland to meet the Chivas brothers, the distillery out there. We were launching Chivas in India. We were working with on-premise and off-premise. So you had typically the distributors and the bonders who would sell your alcohol through all the licensed shops.
This was all in India.
All in India. And then you would have the duty free, which is a separate channel, completely separately, that sells in all the airports in India. And then you had obviously the on-premise, which is your hotels and restaurants, which is again a third channel that you sell directly to. So learning how a very mature FMCG brand operates, how a mature brand is built and managed and maintained, and the spends that you spend on it. So that was also very, very, it might not have been a very exciting journey like Barista and Will's Lifestyle, because anything new is very exciting always. But it was obviously a very, very good learning that how a mature brand is managed, handled, and built very organically. And that was a very essential.
At a young age, you had seen a new brand. You had seen
two new brands. Two new brands. Absolutely.
Wow. And then how did you happen to come on the consulting side and on the other side of things?
So in 2004, I started kind of thinking that, look, I've had a lot of experience. Where do I go from here? I keep continuing in this line in brand marketing.
I think if you would have stuck there, you would have been a CEO long back, and you would be.
I don't know whether I would have been a CEO, honestly. Who knows? Those are all speculations. But I think I would definitely have become the head of marketing for India. That would definitely be a role that I was quite qualified to do, and experienced to do, and ambitious enough to drive that role. But what I started thinking is this is the time to upgrade your education, because I was just a graduate and I'd achieved all of this just being an undergrad. And I wanted to do an MBA. So whatever my savings was, I put together my savings, took a loan from an Indian bank, and went to New Zealand to do a full-time MBA from Wellington, the capital
Oh,
city.
okay.
So
Okay.
that's what took me to New Zealand for a full-time MBA program. And honestly, that's what my money could buy. I mean, I didn't have the money to go to Australia, which was $10,000 more expensive. Coming from a very middle-class family, and I was in a middle management position with an Indian salary. So whatever little savings I had, whatever the bank could give me a loan, back in the day, the bank only gave you about 15 lakhs, which is merely $20,000. An MBA would typically cost you $100,000 to $150,000, anywhere for 2 years. So long story short, I, made my way into New Zealand, started my MBA program, absolutely loved the country. I didn't know that I would in the future become a citizen and stuff like that. At that time, I just wanted to do my MBA and get a good job and maybe explore ways of settling down overseas. So that journey started, absolutely a transformative journey. I could relate with a lot of those subjects because I came from experience. I already had about 8-9 years of experience going into my MBA. Met heaps of international students who came from different parts of the world. Americans, Chinese, Europeans, Scandinavians. So we were a batch of 26 full-time students and about 40 part-time students. So that's how the journey started. After I finished my MBA, so I actually finished it in 18 months. The MBA takes 24. So what I did, I took the summer semester also, because as an international student, you want to finish it as soon as possible and get into the workforce, because, money is very short and you're living off literally a little bit. So I took the summer semester and finished the program one semester before others.
Wow. That's
And
awesome.
then so I did that. I got recruited by Boston Consulting Group. At that stage, I went to Sydney, Australia to work with them. So because I was an experienced hire, I was put in charge of two things. Number one, the government consulting vertical. So at that time, there was a lot of traction with China going on, because China was the biggest trade partner for Australia and New Zealand. And my job was to work with different ministries both in Australia and New Zealand, and look at free trade agreement policies that could pave the way for Australian and New Zealand companies within China who want to do business, and how those policies. So we were consulting with the
This was
government.
2006 or 7, around
This
that.
was end of 2006 till right up to 2009 is where I was involved with BCG, about 2.5 years.
Wow.
So I did that to start with, and then they obviously recognized my ability to pull a lot of business for BCG and build their Perth office and build their Queensland office. And then they started kind of talking about, that why don't you head the business development as a country head? I mean, this is something which is quite your strength. And, so I was taking business away from Bain. I was taking business away from McKinsey. I had, by the end of my journey in BCG, I had a confirm. So what typically happens in a consulting company of that level is you generally work on a contract. So your contract is renewed every 2 years or every 1 year
Right.
based on your performance. So because of what I achieved with them, they wanted to make me a permanent employee and send me into Singapore and look at that vertical within Australia and New Zealand. And that was a great opportunity. And when that was happening, I had multiple offers from Bain. I had multiple offers from McKinsey and Company. I mean, when you work with somebody like a BCG or McKinsey or Bain, you don't even consider people like Deloitte and PwC and KPMG to be even, or EY to even, consider an opportunity with them, because for you, they're all the second tier.
Right.
And I already was kind of getting approached by absolutely the top tier consulting firms. So that's when I kind of came back and thought to myself that, look, dude, if the consulting world, which is known to have the largest intellectual capital, feels, thinks of you with a lot of worthiness, then, I mean, how long do you want to keep working and building other people's brand? There has to be a time when you start building your own brand.
Own brand. Yeah.
And there is never going to be a right time. Your brain is always going to play those games with you and give you reasons that why you should not do it, why you should not kick a seven-figure dollar salary and take a risk like that at your, when your chances are very bright of making it to a senior management. Today, if I would have still stuck to my consulting business, I probably would have made it managing partner in Singapore, heading Australia and New Zealand, probably on the Asia Pac front, getting a hefty bonus, a 8-9 figure dollar salary. and a very, very respectable life.
So
But
that's when your entrepreneurship, which was there in you since the young age,
I
of
think I just wanted more. Tushar, coming from a background where I had very little. My mother, I'm a single parent child. I didn't have a father. I was raised by my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. And money was always under stress. And I think, given that fact, so there were two things. Number one, because of the background I came from, I wanted to make a lot of money in life, which is quite obvious, right? And number two, because I grew up without a father, building my own identity and an independent identity that I'm very proud of was also extremely important.
I see.
So those two became the stimulus of saying that how long am I going to be known for what I did in ITC, what I did in Tata Coffee or Barista, what I did in Seagram, what I did in BCG. I mean, come on, these are all companies that I don't own. I was an employee like thousands of other people like me who've come and gone. So what's the great deal? Like, I don't know, what's the big deal? So
And
that's,
did it
yeah.
also help that, you had seen other brands, how they became so good, and you were able to see their journey and have a bird's eye view that, this is probably what.
Not really, because the people I was dealing with, Tushar, even in BCG, were absolutely Fortune $500 billion conglomerates. So, when you look at bird's eye view of a company that's turnover is $15 billion, I mean, they've probably taken like 60 years to become that. So, there is very little, explicit knowledge that you can learn that you can probably use in your own journey, because it's a completely unrelated field. And I didn't know that till I quit my job and decided to open my own consulting practice. And that's when I tell everybody when I'm on forums that I had to unlearn all that I've learned in my corporate career and learn something I had no idea about, which was entrepreneurship.
Right.
That's when I think I got hit literally by a bus. Because when I quit my job and I went into opening my practice, so I quit my job in Sydney, flew back to Wellington, and opened my practice sitting in a cafe. That, look, I've had such a great corporate career. I'm wanted by all the consulting firms. There'll be clients lining up outside my door, and I won't have a problem. Like, if they don't hire me, who else are they going to hire? Like, that was the attitude. It was a little bit of a cocky attitude. It was a little bit of what do you say,
Amit,
overconfidence.
when I left my CFO position in a company owned by Guggenheim Partners,
Yeah.
I started a startup, and I really thought I can identify with you here, kind of.
Yeah.
I made huge losses initially.
Yes. So
And
see, the
because I
journey is
used
very
to
simple.
think like a corporate.
Yeah. So you will only think from the background that you've come from, because
Right.
you don't have any other reference point to think.
So it happened with you as
So
well?
100%. So in the
Oh,
first
wow.
year of my business, I didn't have any business in the first year. So I was sitting and meeting people from a cafe, and I was also paying back my international student loan because, while I was in BCG, and I was, kind of saving and everything. So I used all my savings in the first year, where I was trying to meet people, market my credentials, meet people for coffee and lunches and dinners, trying to get a contract. For 12 months. I didn't have a single contract. And I was like, what the hell just happened? From being so wanted by everybody, now nobody wants to give me work. Where I didn't understand is the beast that I was operating with. You are talking about a small, medium establishment, because obviously the large companies that are used to working with, and your BCG credentials and everything sells very well there, was immaterial, because I was not going after them. Because you can't take on BCG and McKinsey and expect big companies to give you work.
No.
And the
Right.
small, medium establishments really don't care about what your credentials are, what your knowledge are. They only care about, do I know you, or do I know somebody who knows you?
Okay.
So
Right.
there was no doubt in all those companies' mind that he's a very qualified guy, very capable guy, highly educated guy. All that was already established, because the companies that I worked with were very reputed. The institution that I did an MBA from was in their country, the top university. So all that was never in question. The thing in question was that we don't know who knows him. He's an immigrant. And I fought that battle for 1 year before I scored my first client. And it was an eye opener that, look, dude, you cannot operate the way you operated all these years, because these were structured large companies. Now you're going after people who are 4 people company, 8 people company, 10 people company, all, owner owned and operated companies. They think very differently. They don't even goddamn understand the presentation that you are used to building.
And I don't think they even have a chief strategy officer, or
No,
in
easy.
many
If you
cases, they
ask
don't have the CFO also.
the CFO, the chief strategy officer, chief human resource officer, and chief financial officer, all the owner with a limited exposure.
Okay.
So to get the point across to a human being who's not had the formal education you've had, that have not had the formal work experience that you've had, and obviously hasn't traveled the world enough like you have. I mean, it was a struggle for me because I didn't know how to deal with that animal. I'd never learned, nobody had taught me. So I decided that, look, dude, this is not working. Something has changed. So I started kind of doing everything. I scored my first client. I remember I opened my business in 2009. By the end of 2009, almost 11 months into my business, I scored my first client. It was an early childcare business out of another state in New Zealand called Christchurch. And my job was to build a business for them which would be expandable and franchisable, and also kind of raise investment. So long story short, I started working with them. One center became 6. I got a Singapore company to invest in them and then later on buy them over. So that was a huge success. Based on that, I got my second client, third client, fourth client, fifth client, sixth client. And the journey went the journey started. So I started in Wellington. So I initially, for 11 months, I worked out of a cafe with my laptop and my mobile phone. Then I went into back then we didn't have really shared offices. The concept didn't really exist. It
Right,
was more
right,
recent times. So
right.
I went into kind of hiring a small space, which was basically so what a lot of people did and what a lot of cafes do in New Zealand is they operate from 8 in the morning to 4 in the evening when there is office hours and their coffee sales. After 4 in the evening, they would give you some space for a little bit of rent to work out of there. So where you could they can materialize and capitalize on the space. So I started doing that, man. I started kind of sharing a couple of these workspaces with a couple of cafes and restaurants, and building it that way. Then I recognized the need to move to Auckland because obviously it's the largest city in New Zealand. Most big businesses are based there. Private sector is based there. So in 2010, lock, stock, and barrel, I moved to Auckland. That's where my first official space was in a shared space called the Generator. That was in the heart of Auckland. I had a desk and I felt top of the world because I thought that finally I can afford my own office. So I must be doing very, very well.
Oh, it must have been a great feeling to
It's a
get
huge
the
feeling.
the clients in, and then your own
100%.
office.
100%. A little that I didn't understand that other people were also using that space. So you can't really treat it as your own space. But, in the beginning that you learn it, like you were so proud of the fact that you can now afford a desk and you have a conference room and things like that. So that's how the journey started. Then within a year and a half, we took an independent floor in the PricewaterhouseCoopers building in Auckland. By the time I had about 40 clients in New Zealand, I was already doing, I think, excess of 12 to $15 million in turnover. I had about 36 people building the business with me. In 2012, August, we expanded to Sydney because I wanted to get into Australia. So Sydney International Trade Towers, again, the HSBC headquarters, we had a small, 25% of the floor. I moved 11 of my people from
You never
Auckland.
did that, like, have an office in front of your previous employer so that you can have a look at it?
Not really, yeah. I mean, for me, it was never about rubbing anybody the wrong way.
Right.
It was just purely focusing on what I need to do and how I need to do it.
Yeah.
One thing with me is no matter what happens in life, I don't spoil it over spilt milk. Number one, move on because time is precious. Each time you would give, thought to something that hasn't worked in favor of you, you're taking good time away.
Right.
You can't change the
You're
past.
bringing negativity in the whole thing.
Absolutely. So I don't have time to think about things that I can't change. I only have time to think about things that I can change. So, that's always been in me by default. So anyway, long story short, 2012 was Sydney, and I was expanding quite big in Australia. I was doing work with new clients in New South Wales, which is a part of Sydney, even Victoria State, where Melbourne is. So between Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, and Gold Coast, I was building the practice. So I moved to Australia. to be able to build that practice. I had already a well-oiled machinery in New Zealand, and I obviously used to keep visiting to oversee operations. So in 2013, as I was building my business, I went to Bangalore for a meeting because I was marketing this very, very large architecture practice within the Middle East in India. And I had frequent trips to Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, as well as Delhi and Bombay. So on one of my business trips, I felt really sick, Tushar. I literally, collapsed in my hotel in Bangalore. They put me in a hospital. I went into the hospital, came out of 65 days after losing 8 feet of my intestines. It was a touch and go situation, life-threatening situation. I had a blood clot in my intestines. And, literally, it was a very, very, lengthy and crucial surgery. 4.5 hours. I was probably 25 days in the ICU, and which is a very, very long time to be in the intensive care unit. And then probably for a month.
This was 2013.
13. It was 2013. So long story short,
You were in a hospital in New Zealand or?
No, Bangalore.
Bangalore. Okay.
Yeah, I had gone there for a business meeting, and I came out after 90 days from the hospital, and I came back to Delhi from there. So to be precise, I was in Malia Hospital because it was the closest to Windsor Manor where I was staying, the ITC hotel. The hotel people rushed me to that hospital when I collapsed, and the doctors diagnosed a blood clot in my lower intestines, and the rest of the intestines had got gangrene in it, so they had to cut it out to save me. It was just a battle of life for many days. Finally, after 45 days in the hospital, I finally was discharged. I went back to Delhi, and that's when we started kind of meeting Fortis and Max to do investigations, why it happened and what's the problem. So I was rehabilitating in Delhi for another 30 days to 45 days to get my strength back because I was in the bed all that while. So that's where the real struggle starts from. So with a very broken health. So because of that surgery that I incurred about 300 stitches in my stomach, I don't have 8 feet of my intestines. I developed an incisional hernia because when you have surgery at that scale, it's very difficult for muscles and tissues to grow back. I went back to New Zealand. The business had kind of completely taken a hit. My business partners had cheated me. All sorts of nonsense happened. Clients were unhappy. So my business was basically failing, and I couldn't stop it from failing. So from suddenly doing a turnover of $18 million, money dried up, people started leaving me. I tried to do as much damage control as I possibly could in my own power. But I found myself in a very dark place. By the end of 2013, the assets that I built were foreclosed by the banks. The offices were shut. Every single employee left me. From my cars to my clothes to my shoes, everything was, foreclosed by the banks. And I found myself outside my $5 million mansion with a rucksack and a suitcase and a bottle of milk, and that's it. I was on the streets.
So I mean, I know it's a very dark period of your life, but whenever you have spoken about it, you have always tried to not make it a bitter thing for you. Like you are still in a way you are reconciled that this happened. So so was there a kind of a spiritual side to it where you?
No, so not at that time. So when it was all happening, obviously I was very, I was going through it for the first time in my life, and I had no idea how to handle it or how to deal with it. So I thought the whole world is collapsing. I personally thought that my entire world, because you're losing a business.
Kind of success, when they see this kind of a thing, they generally 100%. Are not able to reconcile with it.
No, absolutely not. So, and this was just the start of the dark period. This was not even the main dark period. That was yet to come, that I didn't even know was coming. So I lost everything. And then I was living off my friends' couches for multiple months till that generosity ran out. I was put in a state home with drug addicts and homeless people, free housing by the government, where every day I saw people, injecting themselves with heroin. I saw knifing incidents happening. police rushing. And I was so scared for the first time in my life because I'd not known how to deal with it. I come from a great family. I've gone to schools like DPS Arkepuram. I've gone to best universities. I've been into Fortune 500 companies all my life. I built a $20 million business. I was driving an Audi A8 and living in a $5 million home. I just had no idea what the hell hit me and how do I deal with it. So I remember one moment where, and to support myself, I was doing 3 jobs. So in the morning, from 4 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., I would go to a supermarket and stack milk cans for daily wages. From 11 a.m. right up to 3:30 p.m., I would clean the bathrooms of the Auckland railway station. And so why I needed to do that is obviously when all this was going on, the New Zealand government wanted to kind of file bankruptcy because obviously I couldn't pay my employees, I couldn't pay the leases and the rents. So I was almost in a $2.7 million hole after selling and settling all my assets. So they wanted to kind of impose bankruptcy. So I had to obviously my passport was confiscated. I'd still not become a New Zealand citizen, but I was on the way of becoming one. So everything was under jeopardy. With all that incident going on. So I'm like, all these years, all this hard work, all this, it's just going to go down the drain. So anyway, one of those days, I was really on a breaking point. And, when we used to work in the Auckland railway station, there were a lot of people with me working. And I remember this guy called Frank, who's a black guy who used to also work there. And somehow we had this code. We never spoke to each other about why are we doing this, because nobody is doing this out of choice. Right. So, we would share lunch, and sometimes I would ask Frank, what's your story? Why are you doing this? So he would say, look, I've got a ailing wife who's ailing of cancer. I've got 3 small daughters that I need to put through school, and I'm doing 5 jobs a day. And he was always positive. He never, kind of painted a picture that, hey, the whole world has collapsed and why am I here? And that's when I started feeling my problems are not that bad, Tushar. Because there are much bigger problems in the world. That what the hell are you complaining about? You still have a brain that functions.
Right.
So from there, sometimes when we would share lunch and Frank would tell me that, Amit, one day you're going to become a billionaire. And, it was kind of one of those laughing moments that, look, dude, I don't know where the next meal is going to come from. And this whole idea is romanticizing about this idea is fantastic, but the reality is something completely different.
Right.
So anyway, that happened. And then one day, Tushar, I was on a complete breaking point that I can't take this humiliation anymore. I don't come from a family. And by that time, trust me, when something like that happens to anybody, your relatives, your friends, people that your colleagues, nobody even picks up the phone and calls you because A, they're all scared that you'll ask for help, that they don't want to kind of help. B, they don't want to ask questions they don't need to know answers for. And C, some people out of them know that they can't help you.
Right.
So they feel very small, So literally.
But I'm sure that there would have been some who would have offered
absolutely. So most people who helped me through that time, not so much money, but more giving me the courage to come out of that, are people who are not even related to me. Random people, random act of kindness that actually showed me that there are good human beings in the world. The people you would most expect it from, they all disappeared. The people that you wouldn't even come in your mind that they will stand for you are people who are standing for you. Like this friend of mine, Brendan, and he's a very dear friend of mine. And I can't be more in gratitude of that person because when I was going through that time, he would come up on my birthday and treat and speak to me as if nothing had happened. He didn't want to make me feel that you're going through a troubled situation. He acted normally. He's like, let's go out for a meal, mate. The shout is on me. Don't worry about it. Let's celebrate your birthday. You can struggle tomorrow. That's fine.
Wow.
Today, let's celebrate your birthday. Let's think about today.
Amit, it reminds me, I was in a similar kind of state and I asked for a loan from practically, I think, 15, 17 people who I thought they will give me a loan. And 75 to 80% people just behaved as if.
That's the reality of life.
Thinking of it.
Look, the reality is we live in Kali Yuga, and the rules of engagement of Kali Yuga are very different. That's the reason we live in a yuga that we do. So it's not the Satyuga, the Treta, where people have the sense of duty and the sense of compassion and the sense of, relationships mean something. That's not the era we are living in. And the earlier that we understand that, the better it is for people. And everybody understands it the hard way. And that's just the reality of
But
life. So
they
I was
say
no
that
different.
what's that? What doesn't kill you makes you
Makes
stronger.
you strong. And I completely believe that, because when I was coming through that incident, I was narrating. I was on a breaking point, and I called up my mother, and my mother, in a moment of weakness, said that, look, I'll give you my credit card number, buy a ticket. And this was just one day before I had to submit my passport for the bankruptcy proceeding to start. So till such time that I had my passport, I could quit the country without telling anybody overnight. So like,
Okay, you
just
had
come
the
back to India.
choice to
Yeah,
do
I
that.
had the choice. So I'm like, I can't take it anymore. My mother's like, buy a ticket, come back to India, we'll sort it out. Doesn't matter. And I started packing my bags, Tushar. I was convinced that I have to go back to India. This is not a life I want to live. And I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror as I was putting the toothpaste in the bag. And one thing, I'm like, look, your exit from New Zealand, you'll obviously, make a cock and bull story and give it to everybody who asks you why you came. But what are you going to tell yourself? Because you know that you're running away right now.
Right.
And this whole dream of becoming a multi-billionaire and all that is all rubbish. Because that's daydreaming. You sit in a cafe and daydream, but you're not willing to pay the price.
Right.
That's when I called up my mother. I'm like, I'm not coming. I'm going to fight this through. And so like my shift would finish at 3 p.m. in the Auckland railway station. From 3:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. till the Auckland City Library closes, I would sit there, read all immigration cases and all legal cases and precedents, because I wanted to take the Department of Internal Affairs to court.
Wow.
That you cannot take my citizenship, because what happened to me was not done by me. Anybody can fall sick. Anybody can get hit by a bus. You cannot victimize them for that. So the court out there appointed a public lawyer, but the public lawyer was not available because obviously it's free, and they have more, everybody likes to do cases that are paid. So I requested that I fight for myself, and I did, and I won with full honors. I was granted my citizenship with full honors in New
Wow.
Zealand. So I
Really
became a
awesome.
citizen in 2015.
It must have like been a very rare of rare cases.
Very rare cases, very, very rare case. And it's a
Winning
very
against the
fair
government,
country.
that also on a
But
immigration
I
kind
tell
of.
you, it is one of the fairest countries in the world. There is a reason why people swear by New Zealand. I've been on state support, and trust me, Tushar, they've taken care of me. They've never made me feel small when I was on dole. And I'm not ashamed to say that there was a time in my life I had to go on the public government support. And they put one meal a day. They gave me shelter. Yes, it was not to my liking, of course. That's not the idea. The idea is to, give you shelter, give you food, and give you medicine. They respected me. They never treated me badly through this entire phase. And that's when the turnaround really happened. I got my citizenship. I convinced the company's office that, look, there are two options. Either you could file bankruptcy, which means all my debts are wiped off. For 7 years, I can't start a business. Great, I won't. But after 7 years, everything comes back to normal, right?
Right.
Or you can give me $5,000. I'm going to buy a laptop, a desk, a chair, and a lamp, and earn you back all that money with interest. And maybe my stars were aligned, maybe my logic they bought, maybe the fire in my eyes they were convinced with. They gave me that loan, and I never looked back. I owed the government $2.7 million. I paid them 3.4 with interest in less than 18 months.
Wow.
And I started rebuilding the business. So when this entire health fiasco happened, there are a couple of great things that came out of it, because it was a second lease of life I was living. With what I'd gone through, it was literally a rebirth. On the 30th of May, I was reborn. So I quit smoking. I used to be a chain smoker. Tushar, on a given day, I was smoking from the age of 15. By the time I'd reached the age of 34, I was literally smoking 45 to 50 cigarettes a day, just under 2 packets a day. I was literally drinking alcohol 3 to 4 times a week and partying my brains off. So I would go through literally a bottle a week of alcohol. I used to consume a lot of vodka back in then. I used to party 3 times a day. I was abusing my body and abusing myself to a level that you can't even imagine. I mean, talk about the drugs, and I've done it all. Absolutely done it all, without exception. And when I came out of that health fiasco, I quit smoking, I quit drinking, and I quit non-vegetarian. something inside me, I think the spiritual birth within me, because I started becoming very grateful to God that it's given me a second lease of life. I could have literally gone away at 35, a young guy, over. Yes, 4-5 days, everybody would have felt sad, everybody would have shed a tear, and then everybody's life moves on and everybody has their own lives to live. And I'm forgotten.
Right.
Except for that
So
one day a
tell me
year that
something
people
like
think is
this health, you came out of it. Smoking, you quit.
drinking, I quit.
It took me 1.5 years to quit smoking. I used to take 30 a day. So, and I was smoking since
I
10
quit
years.
overnight. I
You
quit
quit
overnight.
overnight.
Overnight. I just threw the packet that tomorrow I'm not going to touch it.
And what about the hard drinks?
Overnight.
Wow.
Drugs, alcohol, red meat, smoking, all overnight.
Wow.
Nothing phased out.
So does that mean that that was your start of the impact and the vegan kind of journey?
I still didn't kind of put that together at that time because I was still fighting this whole situation that I was going through. And the
Which
first
year was
priority
that,
was to come out of
Amit?
2013 is when I quit everything.
13.
So
Wow.
I came out of the hospital on the 4th of June, and the last cigarette I smoked, the last drink, the last cigarette, and the last red meat I probably would have consumed on the 28th of April before going into the hospital. And that's it. So 28th of April was the last time I ever touched any of that. 2013. We are sitting in 2023, almost 10 years now.
And post that, you had the bankruptcy and you won the...
Post that, I was having all this. I was going through all of this. One of the things that I didn't kind of think that helped me was quitting all this intoxication gave me the strength and the courage and the stamina to fight this problem. I mean, I couldn't put two and two together because obviously the problem was so big at that time and you were just tackling each day as it comes. But because I was not under the influence of anything, any substance, it gave me the clarity, gave me the confidence, gave me the grit to be able to think very clearly
and good decision making.
So I did that. I came out of that, and when I started reviving my company back in the year 2015, I remember I got my first client, then I got my second client. So again, I went back to the generator, and which was a shared office. That look, it all started from here. I've come back to kind of rebuild, and they were so nice. They're like, you are the biggest icon of what a businessman is. They didn't even charge me money. That till you have the first client, work free of cost. Here, it's an honor to have you around. And that's it. I just didn't look back, man. In 2015, I started. I grew immediately from 0 to 30 people. I got 17 contracts. I paid back my loans. I was in New Zealand by that time. I was making about $35 million by early 2016. In 2016, I revived my Sydney office back. I took the same space, not a different space. I went the same. I waited for 6 months that I wanted the same space. I want to go and build that office. This time, I'm the only guy. There's no partner, nothing. So I built the Sydney office, got clients back. 2017 July, I opened the Dubai office in the Emirates Star. 2019, just before the pandemic, I opened London, central London. And in the heart of the pandemic, 2020, when the world was under lockdown, I even did 2 weeks of quarantine in Singapore. I opened 2 offices because I was growing at 350% year on year. Singapore and Netherlands in Amsterdam.
Wow, that's really awesome.
So I revived my consulting business.
But tell me something. Having a partner who broke your trust. How would you see that in light of the fact that typically a consulting business like you would require specialist partners? So, it was just a bad decision which happened?
No, not really. So it was 2 things. I learned one very valuable lesson, Tushar, in life, that you don't get partners for an activity that you don't know how to do. You get partners for an activity that you don't have time to do because your time is more precious for other things. If you're going to outsource or make people responsible for stuff that you don't know, you can't control it. What you don't know, you can't control. So I started feeling that I have to build all these specialities in me. Then only I'll be able to control people who are responsible for these specialities and see whether they're doing a good job or not.
Right.
So when I made myself capable, as a 360-degree direction in the field that we were advising in, then I thought, why do I need a partner? Yeah, I can kind of hire employees and do it. And then I completely shifted the model from being a very employee-centric business, which consulting is, because a human capital business. I started making everybody into entrepreneurs. I'm like, I don't want you in my payroll. I want you as a vendor. If you are great at financial analysis and you're great at market research and you're great at strategy, why on earth are you taking a salary? Yeah, open a business. I'll become your largest client. Yeah, I'll keep giving you business. It'll cost me 15% more. But look at the amount of performance indicators I have. Tomorrow, the person doesn't perform, I don't pay him. With an employee, you can't do that. You'll have to at least give him 5 notices and take a year before you can, fire them.
Right.
So I completely shifted my business model from a very human capital intensive business to a business that thrives in the network of entrepreneurs.
Right.
So what happened in the pandemic with most people working remote working? I was doing this from 2017, yeah. Way before the pandemic was even imagined. So in the pandemic, my costs were low. I was very lean. I was growing at 350%. So the only difference being, I used to hire, I have a network of 600 consultants globally out of 16 cities working for me. All of them have business. So what I've cleverly done is people who are very good at what they do. So for example, if you are a great financial modeling guy, you are very good at what you do. I know for a fact that you'll be in demand. So I would brainwash you to believe that you can become a business and keep rendering your financial modeling services to a plethora of clients, including me. So I'm one of your clients, you will do 20 other clients. I would put the seed capital to let you open the business, take 30% equity with a promise that 50% of the work you'll do for me. My priority always comes first because A, I'm an investor in your business, and B, I've set you up. So I would take these real estate, give them office space, give them equipment, put seed capital in their company so that they could market themselves and become their biggest business development guy. So suddenly, from doing the whole project, my role became, in 3 years, I got my role to be business development, getting work from all these great entrepreneurs who deliver the project, and number 2, project management, pulling all these bits together.
Wow. Okay.
So I've got a graphic designer designing my report.
You must have called for a leap of faith because you were coming from a company where you had specialist partners, and you would have thought like that.
Yeah. That, I said that, look, I don't want employees anymore. I want entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs think very differently. They're more responsible for the quality of work they do. Otherwise, they don't get paid. Because when you sign a contract with a company that I will render XYZ services for you against this money, that money is subject to you meeting the quality standards that you've signed in a contract with. It's a vendor management contract. So I'm seeing myself today do vendor management. I've got a core team of 12 people who manage 600 consultants in the world. So on my payroll, there are only 12 people. And out of those 12 people, I'll give them ESOPs so that they never leave.
Okay.
Because one thing also I realized through my downfall, 100% of 100 is far smaller than 10% of 1 billion.
Right.
And another realization started happening that, look, dude, I could have literally lost my life at 35 and never been in this world. So I'm not going to take all this wealth with me.
Right.
So the idea is to create value and use resources to create more and more value. I'm not driven by that I should have the most money. Something that I can't take with myself. Why bother about that? Yeah.
So that sense of giving back, that brought you towards the impact side?
100%. So in 2020, when the pandemic broke through, I still remember I was in Auckland for a business trip and I was boarding the flight. So 22nd of March, I landed in 2020. I landed in Dubai. And by the 29th or 31st of March, the whole world went under lockdown. So if I delayed my trip by 2 weeks, I'd probably be locked up in Auckland, which is not a bad thing. I've got assets there. That's been my home for decades. But generally, my wife was here. So I personally feel that, when this was happening, my entire model of working with remote and virtual people that would do projects from various parts of the world. So the easiest way to understand that is I was running a freelancer.com through my own network. So it was exactly like freelancer.com, but for me. So I created a freelancer.com for myself. and only for my company projects. And the model was the same.
Okay.
There were 600 people that I've worked with in the last, let's say, 10 years of my business. And I've identified those people across the world who are very good at what they do, brainwashed them to open a business that, look, dude, you know, how long will you keep working for a company? Open your business. I'll become your business development guy, and I will give you seed capital to open your business as well. So it's a win-win situation.
Okay.
So now I'm in a situation that I own 30% equity in over 100 companies that are these professionals. So all their life, since they do business, I'll get.
And they all are doing priority work for you.
They're all. So that's on the contract. So because I'm putting seed capital and I will get you 50% of your projects. So the pressure is off their head that we don't have to go looking for work. Work is already coming. And you know, when you make somebody dependent on constant work, they don't want to cut that dependence out because it's hard work getting all that business for themselves. Number two, because I've given them seed capital and I own equity in their business, I obviously sit on their board and I've got a say in the matter. I'm a major investor. So that's what I started doing internally. And I think I today honestly sit back and think I create more value because I've created 100 entrepreneurs who in turn have hired their staff. Look at the economic impact I've just made.
Right.
Hiring 100 people will do nothing but add a lot of liabilities to my balance sheet. But building 100 entrepreneurs that all have their independent operating business, you know, are adding future value because they will hire staff. Those staff will be paid and pay taxes to wherever they're sitting. So the economic values suddenly that are added from having 100 people to building 100 entrepreneurs were enormous, unthinkable. And that's when the thought came to my mind that because I did that in my company and I saw how good it's working and how we are growing exponentially, I started, thinking about opening venture capital funds.
This was in 2020. I think 2020.
Yeah, 2020. April 2020, I registered my first fund in Luxembourg in Europe. And we started looking at climate tech as an area. Anything that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and adds to the fight against climate change was something that we were very passionate about. So we started kind of directing ventures mainly in Europe. So, before I go into the VC space, I'd like to first tell everybody, your viewers and everybody who would see this interview, that what do we do in consulting? So we typically over the years have kind of pivoted from advising people how to expand internationally from New Zealand, Australia, to looking at intellectual property as the basis of international expansion. So rather than saying that we are going to go to a market, find a partner, open an office, do a joint venture, and do that traditional method of business of how you expand, we started concentrating on working with small, medium companies that do you have a product, process, or method that can be built into an intellectual property and then licensed out to various places in the world that is more cost effective for you, which is more risk adjusted for you, and then you get these royalties for a certain amount of time. Because looking at the size of New Zealand, Australia, you can't really take on a China, take on a US, take on an India in terms of what they have in terms of both capability, capital, and manufacturing expertise. So you concentrate on building, we will concentrate on selling. So we started helping companies build intellectual property and then advising them on how do you license this and monetize this IP. Of course, we work with a lot of third-party lawyers for the IP protection part of it, which are market to market, depending on which market you're doing it. So this really caught on fire during the pandemic. Everybody was shut. You couldn't take a flight anywhere. All the borders were shut. But an IP can be digitally transferred to Tushar. It is not subject to a human being taking a flight and coming and meeting you. An IP, an intellectual property, with one click of the button, you could be anywhere in the world and you have that on your computer.
Transferred as in?
IP transfer. So if I was speaking to, let's say, if I've got intellectual property in design and architecture on green building methodologies, I don't need to be physically there in India or Dubai telling an architect of how you can use my technology and plug it in as a plug and play model in your own system and
Oh,
achieve
wow.
a
Okay.
carbon, kind of lower carbon emissions through design. I can send you the whole method because it's a digital file, and you plug
Mhm.
and play, and everything could be monitored online. Anyway, in the pandemic, everybody was on Zoom. You didn't have a choice.
Right, right,
So
right.
everybody started contacting me. This is a great way. And couple of things added to this. Number one, the supply chain crisis. Because of Amazon, supply chain was a huge issue world over. Inflation, the oil prices went up, everything became expensive. Inflation everywhere in the world was record high. Suddenly there was lack of raw material to produce, and there was lack, and customers could afford the pricing. So
Mhm.
given this environment, we started putting the entire impact and ESG cap and telling people, you want to be very sustainable. You paint a picture in your own country that we are very responsible as a company. I'm like, how are you responsible? Your raw materials are coming from Brazil. You're selling to India. The amount of carbon that is emitted while shipping is ludicrous. Then how are you claiming all this? It's all rubbish. What you're claiming is alive. I'm like, if you want to make a difference, why don't you use local raw material and local supply chain and transfer your technology to them? Let it be produced in India so that you create jobs, you create business, the costs are controlled, and reach out to the Indian consumer. It's like, oh, the brand will be devaluated. We are 100% New Zealand made. I'm like, if that was the case, there would be no Mercedes Benz and BMW and kind of Audi sold in the world, because Germany doesn't make all of them. There are
Mhm.
plants in China, plants in India, plants everywhere. The brand is not devalued. If that was the case, Apple would be never made in China. The most expensive laptop and the most expensive iPhones. Do you think the brand is devalued in any form or way? People are
Right.
bloody queuing up outside an Apple store before the launch, and all of them are made in China. How is it devalued here? I'm like,
Mhm.
it's your thought process that's devalued.
Right,
The
right.
world has changed. The way you do business has changed. People
But
don't want to put carbon.
Amit, when we see impact businesses, usually the picture in the mind is that we are doing something great for everybody, for the environment, for women participation, for disempowered groups, and for the vegan stuff. But I had my talks with UK DFID guys and also some other impact guys. They say that creating a business out of a motive which is impact oriented sometimes becomes very challenging, because
It does.
a business has a different side to it, and the impact objectives might have a different side to it.
So,
What is your
firstly,
view on
Tushar, my view is very clear on that. You need to choose the impact that is very well aligned with your business. You cannot do everything under the sun. Your business first has to be set up to support that particular impact. There are 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals identified by the UN. Now,
that?
you
Right,
cannot address them all. You need to pick and choose something that is very aligned to your line of work and that you
right.
can locally facilitate. Number one. A lot of people don't do that. They don't have that systems thinking approach. Number two, what you need to understand is completely re-engineer the way that you're looking at business. Now, many people say that if you're an impact business, you're making less money. I think it's the contrary. You're making more money because more customers are buying your product because they want to contribute to something that is more socially and environmentally effective way of thinking. So I
Right.
think the whole new breed of consumers out there want to buy local, want to kind of reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They want to support women. So I think, and especially in Western countries, you're seeing it even more. I don't think that is penetrated so much in the Indian context or the Chinese context or the Southeast Asia context, which is more of an emerging market space. It is slowly, but the actual effects of this you're seeing in the West, Scandinavia, European Union, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, to a certain extent, United States. These countries are standing up, South Korea, Japan, the advanced economies are standing up and say, we want to go towards something called conscious capitalism. There
Okay.
is an increased demand from consumers that please create local, we'll buy
Mhm.
local.
And
Manufacture
how does
local and
it
buy local is a
differentiate
huge
with
wave.
our poor old socialism? How does it differentiate with that?
Look, I don't think it differentiates from a socialism perspective, because this is still capitalism. End of the day, you are running, you're just making it more sustainable for the environment. You're not shipping the product half across the world and putting all that carbon in the atmosphere. And also the logistics cost is going down, the oil prices are high, the ingredients are high. So, using local materials, whatever is available, or creating that value chain that is local dependence, is creating jobs and is great for the economy because they're paying taxes. B, you are obviously fueling an entire value chain and supply chain in your country and getting it back. And C, you are basically feeding into consumers that want to buy local and create more jobs and more opportunities and more, look at our industry and the amount of ancillary things that happen around it. So from that perspective, I think it's not socialism at all. It's a very different way of capitalism. It's still capitalism at the core. You're still making profit. You're still reinvesting profit to grow the business. You're still taking dividends out of profit. So it's not that profit maximization has taken a hit. It's the way you look at profit has taken a hit.
But the fact that we have to create consciousness amongst the people, especially in countries where probably the consciousness about this will be lower, does it add to the cost of running an impact business?
Yes, it does to a certain extent, only depending on the markets that you're selling to. So if you are a business selling to India or selling to China or the emerging economies of Southeast Asia or even Latin America, yes, it would probably, because if you're going to adhere company-wide to what you want to do. But see, this is the problem, Tushar. I don't see that as a problem, because, for example, let's take a case that you're selling to India, because we are both from India. Let's only talk about India. If you're selling to India, how difficult is it to go to India with your technology, set up the manufacturing, get a local partner? All that you need to do is technology transfer. The materials are available, the ingredients are available, the manpower is available, the infrastructure is available. What is not available? I mean, I'm sure if Mercedes-Benz can be assembled in India, then what the hell are you making that can't
be? Right.
So, I mean, if a Boeing 747 can be assembled in India, if fighter jets can be assembled in India, what the hell are you making that can't be?
Okay.
So
but
it's very
do
simple.
you feel that, somewhere within this, because of probably the China factor, China plus one and minus China, and deglobalization, kind of...
Yes, it's happening rapidly. It's happening rapidly because let's look at the world as we stand. This pandemic has changed everything. And if we are under, this is just purely my personal views, that if we are under the impression that pandemic was history, now nothing of that sort is going to happen, we are heavily mistaken. There are going to be economic instabilities. There's going to be social instabilities this entire decade, I feel. And businesses will need to adapting and keep thinking out of the box to how do I service my consumers in spite of all these uncertainties and all these volatilities that we face both on the economic front, on the social front. So businesses are becoming more innovative. And one of the easiest ways to do that is building local ecosystems with your technology that can feed all your customers without a central point of creation and shipping. Very simple. If I make chocolate, I've obviously mastered the art of making chocolate. There's a process, there's a certain quality of cocoa, and there's a certain quality of milk, and there's a certain quality of the assembling process. I can take that and transfer that knowledge to my Indian partner that produces in India, distributes in India, sells in India, and grows the business by reinvesting in India.
Wow,
and I can do the same in every
sounding like kind of a version of Swadeshi, do everything on your own and don't rely on the supply chains.
I mean, so look at what is happening in the supply chain. If you rely on supply chain, you're paying 20% more prices. Obviously, you're going to transfer it to the consumer. The consumer doesn't have the money to buy. IT companies are firing people. Banks are firing people. There's mass scale unemployment going on. The American economy is going under recession. That's going to impact the entire world. Look at the whole world. Which country is doing well? Everybody is struggling. And why are they struggling? Because the dependence on global supply chain. Right. You don't have shipping available. Your prices are crazy because of inflation, and raw material is not available. Right. So what are you going to do? If you're going to be dependent on something where the whole system is broken, then what do? Stop consuming that.
But, this whole situation, does it aid or does it obstruct the move towards businesses becoming more impact oriented?
I think both. I think the smaller businesses are going to adapt faster to becoming very impact oriented because of the size and scale of business is easy to kind of make these changes. The bigger businesses are going to definitely struggle because the balance sheet is going to be impacted overnight. You cannot replicate that entire value chain in a country. So trying to do that is X amount of years. So they will definitely need to make investments in that direction so that 5 years down the line, they can achieve that. And companies are doing it. I mean, Nestle, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, they're all working towards this. Obviously, nothing happens overnight. I mean, but like I said, a small business adaptability rate is much, much faster and rapid than a large business. So
There's one more point, Amit.
yeah,
I agree with what you are saying. I mean, it sounds pretty very logical. Uh, Paris Accord came, right?
yes,
Targets were set for countries to install renewable,
yeah,
right? And
right.
then most of them have not met that because they feel that if we move towards this direction, we'll become uncompetitive.
No,
So,
the
so
reality is not uncompetitive. I think when you take a question of energy as a question, there is no renewable source of energy except for nuclear that can produce the quantum of energy requirements of countries and the population needs. As simple as that. Wind can't do it, solar can't do it, no matter how many solar parks you create. The land that you need to be able to put that infrastructure through outweighs the economic feasibility of the energy that it can produce from it. The only solution is nuclear, and we all know how countries feel about nuclear because if there's a catastrophe, then it's a humanitarian disaster because
like the
nuclear is a very
Fukushima one.
volatile substance to work with. It's
Yeah.
clean energy, even same with hydrogen. It's still the stability is in the question that how do we get this energy in a stable form to produce, mass produce, and still keep it secure. So I'm saying there's a lot of research happening on that, a lot of development happening on that. Maybe 5 years, the landscape looks completely different with hydrogen and nuclear. But today, as we speak, the bigger markets that would contribute to climate change, there is not a single form of renewable energy that can A, satisfy the needs of energy requirements in that country, and B, outweigh the economic feasibility because the amount of land you'll need to use, it's again, polluting it.
Okay, wow. That's really an eye-opening statement.
Yeah,
So
it's a fact, man. I mean, it's a fact. Wind farming, you put how many wind farms? You got a population, India wind farms, you got a population of, over 150 million people. The energy requirements of India and China are the biggest in the world right now, and to a certain extent, Brazil. How are you going to produce that kind of energy with wind farms and with hydro and with all that you have? How? Are you going to
so,
fabricate rivers?
but just the way uh, the huge sloshing around of dollars printed by the US government, they become a solution because easy money is available. So you can probably on the profit and loss side, you can be running more with losses as long as you are
Look, I
getting
mean,
money from the investment side.
we are talking about, more in areas of managing company assets and liabilities to save tax. That's a very different area we are going into. I think that has very little to do with impact. Yes, some people are taking sustainable accounting standards and booking expenses under impact head to save taxes for the government, and that's happening quite rampantly, especially with large companies. Of course, it is, and that's always happened. You cannot have a world which is 100% truthful, 100% what do you say, ethical, or 100% diligent. That is never going to happen till there is humanity, honestly. Unless you go back to Satya Yuga, that in the Indian heritage, in the Indian culture that once was. And that I don't see that happening for the next 10,000 years. So from my perspective, the change has happened, the impact is happening, people are getting more ESG compliant. In fact, governments are placing policy and regulations where companies will have to adhere to the ESG requirements to be getting operational licenses or to be allowed to operate. I mean, UK is doing it, France is doing it, Netherlands is doing it, New Zealand has done it, Australia has done it, Canada has already done it. So all those are really happening, at a micro level. But for it to happen in a macro level, I think we need to give it time. It's a little unfair to think that what it's taken 40 years for the industrial revolution, suddenly in 10 years, everything is going to look very different. It will take time, but I can assure you, with the talks that I have at every level, from Davos right up to individual countries, everybody is thinking about ESG. Some people are successful in implementing a part of it in their business model and still testing out how to measure the impact in the right way. And some people are hiring other people to start thinking about how do we pivot towards that.
Right.
So the move is happening. The move is happening.
Sure. So I mean, so you are now in Dubai and you are managing your offices all around the world, and
Yes.
you have a successful impact investing business, and
Yes.
you also have a consulting business.
Yeah.
You have done it all, seen it all. Where from here?
I don't think I've done it all and seen it all. I personally think the journey has just started, mate. I mean, I have started the impact and the ESG journey. I don't know where it's going to take me, in the directions it's going to take me. Right now, one of my funds is focused on climate tech. The other fund that I'm trying to build in Dubai, in UAE, is going to be focused on agriculture technology and food technology, which also contributes towards climate change. So with this agenda, I'm trying to move out there, bootstrap young businesses, early stage businesses, and help them commercialize what they have with my knowledge and my consulting experience. But honestly, I feel that I've just started the journey. There are miles and miles and miles to go in this direction of impact and ESG.
So where do we see you, like, not like 10, 15, 20, but next 2, 3 years?
I think, to be very safe, the next 5 years, you're going to only see me in Dubai. Yeah? I'm going to be very centric in the UAE, because the UAE government is putting a lot of light on food security and on sustainability. I want to be a part of that whole journey. There is Dubai, like, I don't know whether you feel it or not, but it is becoming quite the center of the world and the financial world. Heaps of companies are coming at a time where the whole world is struggling with economic stability and growth. Dubai is booming because of their liberal policies, because of their taxation regime, because of how globally connected they want to be, how they want to invest in new age technology that is going to build more sustainability, aquaponics, hydroponics, wind farm, hydrogen energy, food security, you name it. And in the area of 17 SDGs, the kind of work these guys are doing, they're serious about it.
Really?
And I think with their appetite for impact, I think it's the right place to be. I mean, a lot of people ask me, why aren't you in New Zealand? That's all about impact. I'm like, you're talking about history. Let's talk about the future. This is the future. This is the city of the future.
And what do you feel about the fact that India has a huge population? Our coal capacity is still being added, but at the same time, we have crossed 100 gigawatts in renewable energy, amongst the very few countries who are doing something aggressively in renewable. And already people, non-vegetarians are slightly lesser in India as compared to other countries. So what is your view on, like, India, impact, India, and in a sense giving back or something like that?
So my view is subjective to two facts. The fact that I'm sitting 4 hours away from India should answer that question automatically, and
Right.
not 20 hours away. So that's number one. So proximity to India is very important. We do recognize that India is growing quite rapidly, and it's going to be quite the market of the future for everybody in the world. And it's no different for us. Number two, I think as far as renewable is concerned, I think India is going to make huge headway in terms of renewable energy, especially if the government's policy sticks to the singular government, and the BJP can carry that forward with its policy. I'm a big fan of Modi. I'm even a bigger fan of Yogi. I personally feel that after Modi, if any leader could steer India in the right direction globally, is going to be Yogi Adityanath. I'm a huge fan, massive, colossal fan. And I have my own reasons for it.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I mean, India is definitely the focus. Obviously, there are challenging issues on policy and regulations and implementation in India. That's always going to be there. It's not going to happen overnight. But I feel, as far as food is concerned, and this whole story getting painted that India is majority vegetarian to a large extent, and as a result, plant-based will do well. We've always been vegetarian, yeah. And all this plant-based that people are talking about, tamasic and sattvic food, we've taught the world what it's all about. So when these goras, meet me online and talk about that, oh, we are sattvic food, I'm like, really, dude, you want to go down that track? like, we've taught the whole world the benefits of turmeric, the benefits of yoga, the benefits of sattvic food. We've got cultural alliances with people who don't consume garlic, don't consume onions. We go into the next level of what this food is. So look, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a big thing for India because we are so much vegetarian. I think, a meat eating country when adapts vegan, I think it's a much bigger story than a vegetarian country, trying to do. So I don't
and
think
just my last question to you, Amit, before we wrap up.
Yeah.
What are the areas within impact which you think in India will do well from a business return perspective?
I think energy is one aspect.
Energy,
I don't
sure.
know how they're going to crack it, but energy is definitely one aspect. A second aspect that I think is a sleeping giant, and India is going to show the world how it's done, is like the way India has shown the world how fintech is done. I mean, there's not a single country in the world that matches the capability of Indian startups that are in the financial technology space, right? In fact, the world is learning from India. With how do you kind of use a QR code to kind of empower millions of transactions instantly.
Right.
So I think gender equality and women entrepreneurs, you're going to see a huge wave of Indian women who are going to build businesses and take them globally and absolutely outshine most of the people in the West, because it's a young market. It's a market which is hungry for growth. It's got enough domestic consumption to fuel large businesses. It's got the potential of not 100, but 10,000 unicorns in a year because of the size of the market. And let's face it, we are young, we are hungry, and we mean business, man. So I think if the world is already not eyeing India, their history, they should shut down their companies and, call it quits.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Amit. It was lovely having you on my first podcast of this season. And it's always a pleasure meeting you, talking to you, seeing your ideas, gaining so much from it. And I wish you all the best in your journey of impact journey and your consulting journey and the health journey and all those journeys. And thank you so much for being here. And looking forward to have you again sometime.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Thank you.